Good afternoon, everybody. I am going to convene the Environmental Matters Committee meeting for December 12th. For the record, all the members are present. And to kick things off, let's see, is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. And next up, approval of minutes. Is there any motion for the minutes?
Move approval of the minutes from the November 14th meeting.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next up, we have legislation 03124, mobile food service vendors signage. Mr. Director Kubriak, if you could please come forward. And just to give my colleagues some background on this, because this is legislation I introduced. What spurred this to action is just on my morning bike rides to work, I noticed a food truck that has a blinking neon sign going 24/7. And normally I was like, that's weird because that's normally prohibited in our code, because for grounded signs on typical brick and mortar buildings, those types of signs are not permitted. So when I inquired with staff, they said, the more they look into it, they said that our code for brick and mortar stores does not apply. We actually have no, I guess, signage code that applies to food trucks because they're on wheels. It's kind of something I guess we didn't need or think of back then, because food trucks weren't really allowed in many parts of the city. So in any case, then I requested legislation get drafted to basically have them food trucks have to adhere to the same standards as brick and mortar stores. And so I got some recommendations from staff on what to include in there, and that's what was in the version as introduced. Since then, I have introduced an amendment which seeks to address a concern that I heard from food truck vendors, but I can had to do with sandwich board signs, and so I did want to get staff input on that when we get to that. But that's kind of reflects the genesis of the legislation as written. So with that, look to my colleagues if you have any questions on the underlying legislation for myself or for staff. Now's a good time.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Kubriak.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have anything you'd like to introduction? Any additional remarks you'd like to give on that?
I don't have anything to add at this point, but I'm here as a resource. And Alderman Savage and I emailed very quickly this afternoon, so I sent an email to you, Mr. Chairman. But I can, at the appropriate time when we get to that part of the ordinance amendment, weigh in a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm here to help get the right language that you feel comfortable with.
I guess to that point, do you have any concerns over the intention of the legislation?
No, not really. My principal concerns would be relates to how permissive the council gets with allowing signage for food trucks, and what those signs begin to do in terms of sign clutter on commercial properties that already have a certain quantity of signage permitted. Because inevitably you increase the total number of signs or the total square footage of signage, and that begins to work against the code. Our basic direction is if food trucks are allowed to have signage, they should be portable and moved off the site with the vehicle and not become part of essentially the permanent signage on a site.
Thank you. That's a good point.
May I?
Alderwoman, yes.
Yeah, I need to be clear. Currently, we allow food trucks in certain areas. They are allowed to have signage, but just not neon signs. Is that what we're trying to address?
I would ask, perhaps you could,
Yeah, so, yeah, well, currently there's no regulation on signage for food trucks. And so types of signs that are prohibited for your brick and mortar would be, they're not allowed to have neon, blinking, they can't have ones that have like moving parts.
Internally lit, can't be.
Yeah, I don't know. Possibly the internally lit. There are a couple other types of signs that we prohibit just because of the distraction or what do you call it? Visual litter, clutter.
yes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a better term. And so yeah, that's the intention.
Okay, because I was just looking at your amendment. And I have to go back to it. That speaks to changeable electronic variable message signs. For some reason, I imagine that food trucks do change their signage based upon the menu of the day or the event that is occurring at the time. So is that what we're trying to discourage in this amendment under C1?
No, let me bring up that amendment. The purpose of,
What is meant by changing?
well, so my intention is not to prohibit the menu sign. If they have like changeable menu signs, I think those, I don't know if they post, I would think they would post those internal to the truck. I don't know if they post them externally or not.
I think we should probably know that before we make this stipulation. And I'm just thinking of my frame of reference is the couple of trucks that do business in my ward. And I believe their signs change. They're not inside their vehicles. And I think they have sandwich boards.
Yeah, so the amendment
Also.
was written to, and we can certainly perhaps work in language to allow the menu signs, but the genesis of the amendment was to allow sandwich boards as long as they don't block sidewalks. Because we did hear some concerns from some food truck operators that sandwich boards are essential to a lot of their business. And I didn't, after giving that more thought, I didn't think it was worth regulating those. We don't regulate those in any part of the city except for downtown.
I was going to say, we do regulate them, but not throughout the entire city.
So I think, because again, I don't personally care too much about, if there's a problem that arises with sandwich boards, we can revisit it, but I at least want to stipulate that they're not on sidewalks.
I'm comfortable with the First Amendment. It is the Second Amendment that speaks to the changeable electronic variable message signs.
What-
And the fact that, and I could be wrong, maybe they don't change significantly.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
But if it changes with their menu, with their event, their whichever, that would impact them
I
in a negative way.
saw Alderman Arnett and also the director had his hand up.
So I have what I consider to be a first-order problem, which is this, signs are in Title 7, 17, and 21, and I can't understand why. It seems like they should be in one place. But then the legislation is confusing because under Title 21, when we talk about applicability and we're talking about signs, we say with the amendment, not applicable to signs on food trucks. Why not? Why can't the sign language be all in the same place? But then this is an amendment to Title 7, which is under business licenses and taxes. The history of the signage goes way back. It was in of course, Ward 8. And it was a question about two different buildings. One was the real estate building that went into the Viking chandlery. And it had a big sign on the front that had internal lighting. And then they put the same size sign on the side with internal lighting. And that was in violation of the relative size of the sign. So you can have one side on the principal facade, another size. Then when the Shell gas station was redone in the gateway, the Eastport Gateway, it wanted to have internally lit signs, and we said, no, in code, you can only shine a light on the Shell gas station sign. So I think what you've stumbled on with this legislation is signage is a mess. I mean, it's all over in the code, and it really does feel to me like it ought to be in one place so that you can, whatever kind of sign you're doing, you go to one place in the code. I'm thinking Title 21, but I'm certainly open to other arguments. But to have an amendment to Title 21 that takes all of the food truck signs out of Title 21 and puts them someplace else does not make sense to me.
Well, so can we quickly address that point? I'm pretty sure that's because that's where we have separate food truck legislation, code to group that in with.
Right. Cynthia
Identify
Reuter,
yourself.
Office of Law Policy Analyst. So the sign language is in 21. It applies to buildings and land. That's it. The food truck is portable, so the city staff has said the sign language in Title 21 cannot apply to something that's moving around, such as a food truck. So we put the sign language in Title 7 along with the food truck regulations. That's why it's there. But we have the provision in 21 just to say to people who, if you're looking for the food truck signage, well, that's over in Title 7. And we tell them where to go.
And what's in Title 17, 17.60? Except for signs exempted in this chapter. I mean, it's all over the place. And I am bringing this up because of a different kind of confusion. Constituents are trying to find things on the city website and in city code, and it is very confusing. And it does seem to me, if we're going to make a fix, I don't know what the urgency is about this particular fix, but if we're going to make a fix, maybe we ought to think about a grander fix where or maybe you're not ready for this, Mr. Director, but where these things all are in one place and they're logical. Now, I understand restaurants are also in Title VII, with the outdoor dining legislation, which is now straddling Title VII and Title 21. And I would suggest that we, and maybe me more than anyone else on the council, are part of the problem here because we look at a specific fix, and it was actually the Planning Commission that directed us not to think about restaurants in Title 21, but to think about restaurants in Title 7. And again, I'm really wondering why we're all over the map with all of these different places. So as far as the amendment, I didn't know what changeable electronic means. I know that food trucks will have an outside of the truck menu board. I don't know that I've ever seen one that was electronic. I think it was just a regular menu board. But that would be something that is changeable, but it's not electronic. So I think there's some confusion about what we actually mean by changeable. is changeable and variable in the same thing redundant? I can't, is it really variable electronic measurement signs?
That kind of, that language is trying to get to the signs that where a word flashes up and then it rolls off or it slides away and it changes to another word and then that slides away and it just keeps rotating. And there could be other ways to phrase that, but I'm not sure what.
So to get to Alderwoman Finlayson's point, if they're changing a non-lit menu on the side of the truck, they're okay. It's just when we get to electronic, which I assume means lit, amongst other things, and is a variable message, and to your point, Alderman Savage, being distracted by a flashing sign, which I don't think we really like in any of our commercial buildings, whether it's movable or not. So I understand what prompted you to do this, but I guess I would go back to the director and ask if we ought not to be thinking about some consolidation of sign legislation.
Well,
Well,
on that,
go ahead.
so on that question, if you think of the topic as signage, one would think they ought to be consolidated. But if you think about them as what action engages this discussion, or what triggers an applicant to engage with the code, then you think it would make sense to have them separate, because it's a licensing action that is being sought here. It's not a zoning permit action, and zoning isn't tied to property. A license is something totally different, and licensing is addressed in a separate part of city code. So if you were seeking a license to operate a food truck, you would go to that part of the code, and there you would see the restrictions placed on your signage and your operation and other aspects that are tied to the licensing action by local government, not the zoning action. So on that score, it's reasonable, and I think that's my answer to your basic question.
But is this going to be enforced by permits and inspections?
Most likely,
Do they enforce
yeah.
Title VII?
Yeah, through,
I have to go look at that.
yeah, it would be enforced by inspections and permits and as we manage licensing. It doesn't have to be, but I assume that it was. But in the zoning code, it actually says you can't have portable signage. Like you can't have a sign that you move around a lot.
Right.
You have one sign, but because things are tied to the land and the zoning confers certain rights. But you can have a license operated legally to a food truck, and if you do that, you're going to face some restrictions on the amount of signage. And there's a principle here at stake, because you can't move a food truck into a zone that has protective signage that achieves a public purpose, and that food truck just destroys the purpose, and works against the purpose of the zoning code or the sign regulation. So I think it's okay, separate, and maybe it's one of those things we try it out for a while if vendors are having difficulty. But in terms of administering the code, we would feel that it actually helps to have them separate. There's a licensing function and a zoning function.
Okay, so it sounds like, thank you. Sounds like we've got potentially that issue addressed as far as location.
All right, so then going back to the legislation itself on page 3, we're essentially wiping out all of the red on page 3 and substituting the Savage Amendment number 1.
That's correct.
And then the two questions I think Alderwoman Finlayson raised the question about changeable electronic.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah, so
are we clear on what we mean?
well, so I think that's a good point, Alderwoman and Alderman. I suppose unless the law office has or department has a reason for including that, we could remove that language which would then allow some of the menu boards, but the language below would still prohibit flashing signs or animated signs, which I think would accomplish my purpose, which is it's the one that, it's a small one that blinks like whatever it says, hello, whatever type of food, and different colors and flashing, which is, I just
So
don't want to
why can't
perpetuate.
why can't we say that expressly, flashing or animated signs?
Well, we have, so I think the amendment is a little misleading because I think the blue, I'm not entirely sure what the blue means.
Yeah, you do have animated and you do
Because
have flashing.
it's actually a complete,
Yeah, so
I don't think it needs to be blue.
There's
Was there
no
a-
blue in the key, so how do you?
The phrase changeable electronic variable message signs moved from a different section in the amendment.
In the, okay.
Oh,
It moved from a
yeah, we moved
a
from
different
page-
section down to prohibited signs.
Okay.
That's why it's blue there.
I would suggest maybe I think maybe just drop the blue, because it's just a swap for the amendment. But even before that, I guess,
Sure, remember, you can make it so.
even before that, I think maybe we just, again, unless I hear a compelling reason from law or department, we could just drop the changeable electronic variable message signs and still accomplish my purpose, I think, and that would address the committee's, did you see a problem with that? or-
And to be clear, because I don't have the
Yeah.
amendment from me, I brought with me an electronic version of the older agenda that doesn't have your amendment. So the amendment in blue says that animated or electronic message variable signs are prohibited
Yes.
on food
It
trucks.
says prohibited signs, and then it lists, well, the alderman will show it to you.
So why is it in blue?
Because it's
Yeah.
And it came from back
Are we gonna add green and yellow too?
on page 3. So, where is it?
I understand. I can understand why law did it. I just,
And
How are we supposed to know that?
got rid of this because
I hear you.
it's carried over, but I don't
We make
know
changes and then we don't bother to tell the people who are
that
mostly impacted by them.
Randy's interest.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah, so just drop that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's okay to,
I think the animated and flashing prohibition covers that. And-
Okay.
And you're creating redundancy. I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. Law office have any comments on that?
she's not following.
So it got carried over from page 3 here. And
Oh, I see. So the blue is things that were kind of moved around. But we,
I'm not a mind reader. I don't think we are, you know.
but
Move from
well,
where?
We can, I think we can just ignore the blue for the time being.
that
And,
one, that one.
I'm good with the first one. It's the second one.
So the
that,
second one, do we want to?
We're gonna
Do we want to
eliminate?
make it a committee amendment to change it?
Yes.
Yes.
So, Ms. Jackson, could we just have a,
I'll make,
Do, we want a motion to
yeah. is there a
amend
motion
the
to amend it
amendment
that
to
direction?
delete C1
right.
on page,
Second.
whatever page this is, page 3?
Yeah, all those in favor of that amendment,
Aye.
to the amendment?
Hold,
You have to say on page.
3.
Page 3, line.
Well,
We don't have lines.
we can't, so I guess in lieu of that, what I'll say is, can we vote on this and then we'll give, I mean, perhaps we can just give it to the law office to draft a new amendment, withdraw mine and make a new one that's the committee
A
amendment?
new Savage 1 amendment, yeah. you can do
Yeah,
that.
and it would just strike C1? Okay. Got it. So can we vote on that amendment? The new amendment?
I
Okay.
made the
Okay,
amendment.
so all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, and then, are there any other comments or changes?
And we are taking out blue.
Yeah, no, and no more blue.
I do have a question. We don't have a staffing impact statement that's supposed to be, that is required with all of our legislation. I see the fiscal impact note, I see a staff report. I see that it seems to be embedded in the staff report, which is not what we've asked for. So could we get a staffing impact statement? And from what is written here by Ms. Buckland, it's not going to have a significant impact. And we seem to be saying that about everything. And cumulatively, yes, it will have an impact. So I don't think it's an adequate reflection of staff responsibility and time.
Yes, Director?
Thank you for saying that, Alderwoman. I do appreciate that. These do have impacts. And if anything, there's an impact in just getting accustomed to their new regulations that has a real fiscal impact. So it's worth even mentioning that. But on the amendment itself, it seems to me that a number of signs could be allowed if they're related to or come along with the food truck. If you read that, the amendment wouldn't allow potentially for multiple A-frame signs to be positioned on the property advertising the food truck. And if so, I have real reservations about that. And my concern early, when this was in the early drafting phase and coordinating with Mr. Lyles, was to really eliminate the possibility of any signs other than signs attached to the truck, because we wanted a clear distinction between the zoning and the licensing function. And we knew that if you introduce new signs, all of a sudden they need to be reviewed in the context of how sites operate. People move through the site and circulate and clutter and things like that. But as I read the comments from residents or business owners that would be impacted by this, I was moved by that, and I thought, well, I guess some amount of signage would be okay, provided it's close to and made part of the food truck kind of place, where so where the customer stands, there could be a sign, for instance. But there shouldn't be a food truck sign on the corner or the intersection as you drive by to attract you to the property, because then that's zoning. That violates the intent of the zoning code. So my suggestion would be to allow just one, in my judgment, just one A-frame sign in close proximity to the vehicle. And it may be, 5 feet, 10 feet, or whatever, or some other language that addresses the concern. But we wouldn't want to open the door to commercial signage being increased on a lot by virtue of the fact that there is a food truck now. And again, the more signage you place on an otherwise cluttered lot, the more safety issues there are for drivers who are passing by who are distracted by signage, but also the aesthetics of the area start to degrade, and maneuvering through the site as looking for a parking space or driving in as a motorist, things get confusing. And what we don't want is confusing maneuverability on a site.
So that's good to know. What about, so there is, in the amendment, it does have temporary sign language, says that they shall not be placed on a public sidewalk. Oh, and before that it says site visibility, no sign shall obstruct a clear view to and from traffic along any street, right-of-way, entrance, or exit. And then under temporary signs, it says not near a sidewalk, or not on a sidewalk. 2, shall not impede or obstruct pedestrian or vehicular traffic. 3, temporary signs shall be removed when the food truck is not in operation. To your point, it doesn't address quantity. So we could add a 4 IV that says temporary signs shall be limited to no more than 2 in close proximity to the truck only.
You could do that.
Like that.
I would encourage you not to use the word temporary signage, because that's a term of art in the zoning ordinance under 2170, the section on signs, and temporary signage is defined and is tied to the zoning. I would simply say a sign, and it has to be removed when the food truck is not operated. So we're not mixing apples and oranges here, right? We know that's temporary because it's tied to the operation of the truck. It's enough to say it has to be removed upon.
So you're saying we can remove temporary in all its, well, it might get a little confusing, because if they could very well have a sign attached to the side of their truck, and that's essentially a permanent, right? The temporary are the sandwich boards, primarily sandwich boards,
Yeah.
right?
And I would say, to make it clear, just suggestion, the license may permit up to one A-frame or sandwich board sign located in close proximity to the food truck, but no greater than 10 feet away. And said sign shall not interfere with any on-site circulation or be placed in any way that interferes with pedestrian maneuverability. Language like that. And trying to move away from the sort of the zoning evaluation type of language that is listed there in the amendment, and make it just clear, like a clear licensing thing. So you can imagine these are checklists on the license that staff would check before issuing a license, and it'd be very clear to the operator, you know, whether he's in compliance or not with the license.
Well, so does the department issue licenses for food trucks, or is that all through the health department?
I candidly don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
If it's on private property, I don't think it's licensed.
I don't think we do, and I don't know even if I don't think the language written would create a licensing requirement. It would just allow the department to, it just makes a standard that's out there that they would have to comply with. So if it'd be more of a reactive application.
So the city doesn't issue licenses for the right to operate a food truck within city boundaries?
Not that I'm aware of, but we could get that
I
verified.
thought
It's not a
we did-
license then.
I thought we did at one point. I remember a guy in my ward having a food truck and was trying to, and maybe it was the health department he was
I
trying to
think they
get.
have to get inspected by the county health department. but
Yeah.
not-
We
But
do
there is
inspections,
some
but they're-
inspection process.
Yeah, the county health department does do inspections. I'm hearing John Manasseh right in my ear because we talked about this months ago. But the staff does inspections of the operation on a site for basics. Is it located in the proper way? Is it taking up a parking space or two? Is it interfering with the circulation on the site? We'll run an inspector out there to confirm those things from time to time. Is there trash and litter, things like that?
Wait, John Manessa's in your ear?
But not literally.
But we imagine.
Yeah, right. It's right here next to
Mr. Chair, though, I think that what the director's saying suggests that this really needs to be written as subsection B, because all of it's called temporary signs, so I don't know what we call it. I guess it would be non-attached signs. Signs shall not be placed on public sidewalks. Signs shall not impede or obstruct pedestrian or vehicular travel. Signs will be removed when the food truck is not in operation, and signs will be adjacent to the food truck or no more than 2 feet away from the food truck. But we can't be calling it temporary, or we cross over into Title 21.
Well,
Do you want to call them removable signs?
sorry?
Do you want to call them removable signs?
Another what?
Removable signs
Oh,
instead of
removable
temporary
What
signs?
what does the department think about that?
How about
fine.
collateral signs?
Oh, I see. So, but just changing the name, it doesn't conflict with what you're saying as far
If you
as
don't want to specify a sign type, if you say A-frame, you're clearly saying that's the type of sign. But you can imagine a pole sign in a bucket full of concrete, you know, doing the same thing. That's not an A-frame sign. So a removable sign would be fine.
Okay, so
The operator puts it back on the truck before the end of the day and
can
it's
we
gone.
work into the amendment request that from the committee? Well, we can have, I guess, is there a motion from the committee to change temporary to removable?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Before I.
Oh, is discussion, sorry.
Discussion. A has the same wording that I just heard that was going to go into B, which has to do with impeding traffic.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, is it necessary to duplicate that language in both sections, or?
I see.
Is
what
there
you're
a need
saying.
for site visibility when we speak to it in B? That just seems like a weird title to begin with.
Yeah, it does. I agree.
Site visibility,
Yeah,
you're saying?
especially if we're going to say removable signs. Of course, visibility would be included in the location
Well,
of those signs.
I guess the value in having that A is that it applies to all potential signs that they might add. Although I guess they'd all technically be removable, except for the ones attached to the truck.
Is there a time sensitivity to this?
No,
I'm wondering if we can't pick it up, postpone, rewrite this. I think we're making some really good changes and actually some necessary changes according to the director. But I agree with Alderwoman Finlayson. The first one, A, seems to be actually a subset of B2, referring only to visibility. And I think B2 talks about any kind of impedance, which I like the broader definition. It could be impeding vision, it could be impeding mobility, all of those sorts of things, so.
I'll second that. We already have a motion on the floor. We're about to vote
well,
on.
and I mean, I think we might be able to combine everything. I don't know if we need to specify. Well, I guess you do.
Mr. Chair, I heard the director say, though, that he didn't think that this was ready to come out of the law department, that he hadn't finished.
Yeah, I heard that. It was in your other ear.
So I don't think it's out of line to send it back for additional review.
Yeah, no, I'm not opposed to that, though I don't know if I heard those words from the director, but
I heard something similar. I wasn't quoting him, but I heard him say something.
I would just want to make sure that we are clear what kind of changes need to be made. I can see, so we have changing temporary to removable signs.
But is it only
Although
in
And
A?
we need a staffing impact statement.
Pardon me?
Staffing impact statement.
Staffing impact statement.
My only concern with removable is, I don't know. I think we might be able to address these issues by just creating a definition for the subsection of temporary sign or removable sign so that it's different from the one in the zoning code. So say either temporary or removable includes, but not limited to X, Y, and Z type of sign, the platform, anything that's not attached to the truck, basically, right? That would be what we're trying to
What's the motion?
group in.
If I might, I think we can remove A altogether because it's taken care of by B sub I. We can change it to removable signs, and we can add a small IV, which says signs must be immediately, any signage, removable signage must be immediately adjacent to the food truck. Or something like that.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we can remove A. That's,
Don't you think it's covered more broadly in B2?
well, so, again, I think whatever we call it, the temporary or removable, it's got to be defined as any sign that's not attached to the truck. Because that'll make sure we capture everything. And then, I mean, to your point, I think we could expand B2 to include whatever we remove on A. The only thing A has that 2 doesn't is obstructing a clear view. So I think A is worded a bit better. So I just think 2 can be reworded to reflect some of the sentiment behind A.
But 2 has more than view. It also means you can't impede people from walking around it or driving around it. So.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
I think 2 is actually broader. Impede or obstruct It can obstruct vision, it can obstruct getting around it, it can obstruct vehicles being able to pass on the street, whatever it is. But then the idea that the director has introduced is all of these signs, whether it's a sandwich board or sign that's stuck on a pole in a pot of concrete, all have to be by the truck. You can't have it a block away with an arrow pointing to food truck down this alley or whatever.
Okay, so how about,
Mr. Chair, we have a motion on the floor.
would the person who moved the motion be willing to withdraw it? So
Well, we can vote it down and then
Or
move
just-
on.
Either way. Okay.
I don't even know who made what motion.
So the motion is to recommend changing the wording from temporary to removable. So
Or you two could
That's
just
good.
withdraw it.
we'll just
Did I
vote.
make it? I'll withdraw it.
Okay, well, I'll withdraw it if that's appropriate.
Withdrawal is one of my best things.
Okay,
And then-
okay, so we withdraw that motion?
Okay. And so for staff, if you could work on some new language to address those issues, and also the committee amendment, which we'll probably end up changing next time.
Which is consistent with the motion to postpone.
Yeah,
So
and
I
then,
make-
so if you could share, the law office could share that with the department, and hopefully before the next meeting, we can get that sorted out.
Mr. Chair, may I
And-
recommend that you meet with them before it's brought back to us so that
Yeah,
they'll
once
be clear
the
on the
department
changes?
and law office gets on the same page, you can send it to me, or at some point loop me in. The other item, did the law office get that potential new item 4, B4? Temporary signs should be limited to no more than 1 or 2 in close proximity to the truck.
Which one are you talking about?
That would be a new
A new
for
4, which would be
under B.
Oh, okay.
stating they have to be in close proximity to the truck and limited in number to address the director's concern.
I like the idea of the arrow pointing
Wait a minute,
wherever.
John's saying how close is close.
Just kidding, just kidding. Of course, it has to be flashing, I mean.
Well, if you feel like we need to define proximity, feel free. Close proximity. All right.
No closer than a grenade.
Is there a motion to postpone
Right, so moved.
Second,
action? All right. All those in favor of postponing, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Legislation postponed until next meeting.
and Mr. Chair,
before
again,
the
we need
director
a
goes-
staffing impact.
Oh, yes.
statement.
And please,
You have it in there.
if the department could look at the staff report and see if there's any language to be added on staffing impact.
Yeah,
Based on however it turns out.
We will,
And if you look into current permitting or licensing,
yes.
okay, because I don't think this is necessary. I think it's more going to be reactive enforcement.
Okay.
But, okay, so thank you. And before you leave, Director, we do have, I think, a couple development questions.
I do.
Do you have anything you want to report on new developments, particularly pertaining to environmental review or
No, I don't.
along those lines? Okay. Alderman Arnett, I saw you have your hand. Do you have specific questions?
Yes, I did. I guess the overall request is, it would be helpful if there was some indication on this spreadsheet about what is different from the last version we saw. But I did have some questions about 114 Compromise Street. I'm not sure what that is. It's not, it says city dock, but is that really city dock? 114 Compromise? Or
144?
144, I mean?
is that part of the resiliency piece of it?
What else does that line in the table say? That might be
It
locational.
says city dock resiliency improvements, planning commission approved for, approval granted on February 1st of this year. It's a public park.
Yeah, that's city dock. That's the city dock resiliency plan, park and resiliency plan.
On Compromise Street?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
that was where the one pump
Pump
used to be.
station is.
that we've the that is an odd convention in terms of addressing. That may actually be targeted to the part of the city's property that is near the Alex Haley statue and wraps around into what would be the Dahmer Park, which is kind of on Compromise Street as you approach the circle. But it is the city dock plan.
I guess here, because the very next one is 69 Prince George's Street, and again, that's an expansion of city dock plan to include Prince George's, and I'm wondering how much of these two were taken care of by the Planning Commission vote last Thursday?
Yeah.
And if so, there's no status update.
The city dock, the 69 Prince George Street application was approved by the Planning Commission. That's the visitor center, the redevelopment or rehab of the Burtis House and the street end park at Prince George Street.
So these would be separate from what was approved Thursday?
That is what was approved Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. So maybe they need to be consolidated in the spreadsheet.
Perhaps, but they are two separate properties, two
Okay.
separate projects that have run almost concurrently, but one behind the other through separate approval processes.
So on the next page of particular direct importance to me, I don't know where we are with the loft at Eastport Landing. I think a second appeal at the appeals court was dismissed, but does that mean that work can now commence at the pleasure of the developer at the shopping center?
I believe that is in fact the case. I don't think there's anything in court that is holding things up, but we are not involved in those details at the court, and I only say that because I had called and questioned the principal attorney, Alan Hyatt, on that matter several months ago. And at that time, I thought the message was the court case is winding down, and there's a question about whether he foresaw any further legal action being taken. And there's a sort of a period of time when the project would be in the free and clear. It seems like they may be at that stage. I just don't know the details of that.
Yeah, so that seems like it is not in 033 that was just recently introduced, but could be part of that. I mean, it could be that if there's a period of time during which no subsequent legal actions are taken in any of the circuit court or appeals court, that the project is free to go forward.
Right.
And have that, I don't know, I mean, we'd have to work with the Office of Law. We can't preempt people's right to appeal, but it does seem like you can't just hold it in suspense forever.
Right.
So if there's no follow-up action after 90 days or 60 days, whatever, that the applicant is free to proceed with an approved plan.
Right. And the 033 bill would say effectively the stay at circuit court would be through a law or state law, statute, or court order. I don't think either of those cases applied or any of those triggers occurred with this particular case. But right now it's operating under that automatic stay. But again, it may be out of the appeal process at the court level. I just don't know.
Well, so we have a number of things that are kind of in this suspense thing. We have Parkside Preserve. That's ongoing. When does Parkside Preserve fall off of this list? And similarly, Rocky Gorge, that's not ongoing. And as far as I know, there's no live new application to do something with that. So when should it fall off the list? SPCA, I think
Right.
That's about ready to open, so it should fall off the list. Willows of Forest Drive. I mean, seems to me like it's done. It could come off the list. I don't know what, West Village, I did look that up, but I can't remember. 161, is that the gas station? Let's see, removal,
Well,
three-story
to the
structure.
to the Alderman's point, just real quick, that the intention of this list
Yeah.
originally was to go over projects that have active environmental reviews that are open. For example, forest conservation, where they are in the process. So once the permit's been finalized, in this case, I would say the grading permit, the grading permit hasn't even been finalized yet. But we'll have to figure out when to remove them off that list, because at some point, like Parks and Preserve, it doesn't really make too much sense to be on there at this point, since they're not completely built out, but they're, well, I say that, but there are some.
These projects have open grading permits for years
Yeah.
during the construction and following the construction. And I think that list was meant to be like an ongoing tracking of development projects through the multiple stages. But it doesn't have to be if that's not your purpose. But I know you're interested in the forest conservation compliance, obviously. And so this format helps with that. But we can work through that list and see
Yeah,
what
I'd be
has been
happy to sit down, or the chair can sit down with you. Some of them are still of interest, so I think there's a broader interest of the status of projects than just environmental matters.
Right.
But it's hard to know. Village of Providence Point, I don't know, it says pending approval, I think it's been approved. It's pending getting out of the hands of people that are exercising their legal rights.
Is there anything else, Alderman?
No.
So I'd like to move to our
but
colleague here.
I do have just
This
a
is,
simple
this is a useful document. It's just, and I would make the same comment on the sustainability report that we're gonna get in a minute. It's got great stuff, but it's hard to know what's new and what's just a continuation of
Okay.
the project. So,
I think
we're very appreciative of getting this. This was actually developed by Frank Biba years ago.
Right.
And it's a good document, but it isn't helpful to not know if there's something new.
So what Mr. Biba did, I think, is just make something bold if it's change from the last report. Alderwoman,
Yeah, I just had a question. Grissom Square, where is that?
that's the corner of Tyler and
Well, I can
Bay
read that.
Ridge. Oh.
That doesn't help me much.
sorry, were you
That's what it
asking-
says.
oh,
Where is that, on the corner of Tyler Avenue and Bay Ridge?
it's
There's a Tyler Avenue and Forest Drive, and there's a Tyler Avenue and Hilltop.
it's
This is Tyler Avenue and Bay Ridge.
yeah, you know,
And as I recall, there's 4 houses on
I'll
those
show you. It's
corners.
at the,
It's a
It's at
zombie
the-
project.
well, we'll get to that, but it's out of traffic signal. If I can,
It's the one that when you come down the hill on
I'll show you.
Tyler Avenue coming up on Bay Ridge, right? Isn't that the intersection we're talking about?
I'll show you. It's right here. Tyler. So this is Tyler Bay Ridge Ave. That's the light. So it's actually these behind these homes. It's going up here.
Okay, so it's
It's like they subdivided, I think, the lots. So it's like how many homes is it? Like
12, it says here.
Yeah. So they're all clustered in behind the homes.
So,
They're really
okay, so
long
it's not
lots.
facing either one of those streets, really?
You know, the egress is going to be on Tyler, I think. So the entrance somewhere around here. if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. That was the only one that was kind of foreign to me.
Right.
You and I had talked, Mr. Jakubiec, about the Rocky Gorge and
Right.
the Willows. And the Willows seems to be moving ahead pretty briskly. But they still stay on the list until,
Fine, I'll close. to
Well,
find out.
it depends on how we modify and amend the list. But they are on the list now because the project's not completed and has an open grading permit. But if we modify the list and make it more streamlined, then it could fall off, or it could have a different status. It could be under a separate section that says development projects in progress. That's where it would fall on the list.
How much of the road that has to be built for that access way into whether it stays on the list or goes? Or how do we judge that? I mean,
I don't know that's a particularly relevant factor for whether it stays on the list or not, because there are development projects that don't create new roads. It's just it's a character of that particular development, but it's not necessarily a factor that would keep it on the list necessarily. I mean, we would want to keep it on the list until the road was done,
Right.
if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Under the way the list is formatted now, sure.
okay, and that is what I was getting at.
Yeah, okay. got it.
Yeah, is the road isn't done, then the development's not done.
Right.
Yeah. So, thank you. I find this very helpful.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
so I just have some request for you on Griscom Square.
Now
Because
that you know where it is.
yeah.
Now that I've been reminded too, where it is. Thank you.
So that we had this issue, and speaking of zombie permits, we had this issue pop up with, oh gosh, was it Rocky Gorge? One of them. Similar issue in that I'm going to point out to City Code 17.08.140, which is the grading permit code. And that particular section deals with expiration, deadline extension, non-transferability. Because I've heard that a new owner's potentially going to buy the rights to develop that property from Public Works.
Griscom Square?
Yeah, so you might want to check with them.
Okay.
And it might be a question for them too, because it's a grading permit. But the code does state that a grading permit expires if no work is commenced within 90 days after issuance.
Right.
It's been much longer than 90 days. So the standard that we've used before, which was out of Rocky Gorge, is that the work, and this is the city attorney at the time, said that when it says work, that had to be substantive. What was the word? Not substantive, but I forget, like significant work. And in that case, it was underground stormwater that was installed, and that was
Okay.
considered to be, gosh, what's the term?
Substantial?
Substantial, yes, thank you. Substantial work. And so in this case, I know they've dropped off material, but they haven't really done any work on the site. There's still the old abandoned house at the corner, which I've received complaints about. And I've asked staff, actually, I can't remember if I emailed you about this or not, but or somebody else in the department, but I've received complaints about potential fire hazard, homeless living in that building, because it's been sitting derelict since the permits were issued. And so I'm concerned about the public hazard aspect of that. But staff, yeah, I guess it was your staff. They're hesitant they don't want to issue, normally they'd issue an order to demolish the building, right? But because it sounds like it is changing ownership, they want to wait. But I don't want to be in a waiting pattern for another few months, right?
Right.
Because it's potential hazard. So I want to make sure it's safe in the meantime, and we give them a timeline. If it's not cleared by a certain date, we just need to do it ourselves and put a lien or whatever, use the bond money, potentially.
Yeah, we're talking about that now, and there's a precedent for that. Recently in Eastport, we took assertive direct action to force the removal of a building. And as it turns out, that got the attention of the parties
Good.
responsible, and then they quickly worked with us and got the project removed. But we had to assert city authority to enforce the code against
Yeah.
unsafe structures.
Yeah,
I
good.
think on that project, they were going to, because I was notified that they were going to go ahead and do work which would block whatever that is, Bay Ridge or Tyler there in front of the house. And when they started opening up, they found the pipes weren't where they thought they were. And so they had to go back and do a review of where they are. And then I guess in the interim, the ownership may be changing hands. I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
there was that issue,
Yeah.
but then now it's changing hands. So anyway, that's the other question, is that 1708-140.b, which is potential expiration of that permit. Yourself or Public Works might need to look at what needs to be done to resubmit that, because they're probably beyond the period for renewal. In any case, that needs looking at. And then there's the, in letter E, it talks about transferability. If they're changing ownership, permits aren't always transferable. In this case, they are potentially transferable with the concurrence of the director. I think that's the director of Public Works, because this is the grading code. So I might be talking to the wrong person.
Right.
But it all depends on if the conditions have changed or not. But in any case, I'll have to just giving you a heads up on that.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
All I have. All right. Anything else for the director?
I'm good.
All right. Let's move on.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's never coming back.
Resilience update.
Do we have to add all the reports every time to their agenda?
Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Right. Good afternoon, Jackie Guile, Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. So we have a 6-page update.
Could you pull the mic a little closer?
Sure, I have a 6-page update for you, and I've tried to put in all caps update where we have some new information on some things here. So I'm just going to go through and hit some of the highlights on here. I do have on the resilience planning, which is the second item on here. The University of Maryland invited the city of Annapolis to participate in a 3-month coastal resilience planning series. It mostly focuses, it's Annapolis and 7 other coastal jurisdictions. We will work with a project advisory group, which will provide technical assistance to each jurisdiction after the coastal resilience seminar. And that technical assistance will help each jurisdiction develop a resilience work plan, prioritizing nature-based projects. So Mr. Lakonich and I are the staff representatives for Annapolis to that process. Alderman Savage is the elected representative, and Breaking Boundaries LLC with Randy Rowell is the local disadvantaged community representative that will be working with this group. So that kicks off. We had an introductory meeting last month, but this kicks off in January, and then it goes through 2026 as well. So we will use the information we glean from that effort, which is mostly nature-based solutions and resilience planning, and build that into what we've already started doing with climate resilience planning. So we'll build on what we've already started doing with what we will learn from this University of Maryland project and build that into it. And thank you, Alderman Savage, for volunteering to serve as our elected representative.
You're welcome.
Before we leave this page, can we go back up to the LED streetlights?
Sure.
And that question about discussing whether or not it's more cost-effective for the city to transfer the ownership of the streetlights. I just made a note to myself, we do get revenue from all of the phone companies purchasing their, I forget what you call it, their short range, I don't know what it is, for cell phones. And so if we transfer the streetlights to the BG&E, does that mean we won't get that revenue, however much it is?
If we transfer the streetlights to BG&E, you're asking if we,
It's a small cell, what do they call it? Small cell something, but it's a small cell repeater. So it's when the cell is not good, cell phone reception isn't good, they put up those small cell repeaters, and they get permits from us and they pay us for parking their equipment there. I don't think it's a lot of money, but if we transfer it over to BG&E, all the poles, will they get that money then?
The question is, will BG&E get that money instead?
Yeah.
Well, we'll explore that with BG&E.
May I follow up with a question? Does BG&E own all of our lights?
No, not all of them. We have a map. Do you have that map I gave you? Yes. Okay. Yeah, we have a map of which ones are owned by BG&E and which ones are still owned by the city.
Streetlights.
Streetlights.
The street
I'm
lights, right.
talking about, yeah. Because I had the occasion to make a request to them to replace the lights in the community of Oxford Landing, which they did. They had replaced some of them, and then there was a, this disparate treatment of different streets. So
Right.
they did come in and replace, I believe now they've replaced all of them. So I guess I was wondering if it's that simple to make a request of them to come in and replace more of our lights, or what's the plan for getting all of our lights moved to the LED lights?
Now, BG&E had a plan to replace all lights to LED, and I believe they have at this point done that. If they've missed some of them, residents like you or residents might report to you that they want it done, and then they come in and do it. Or sometimes they turn purple when they're
Yeah.
going bad. If you've noticed a purple light, that's an LED that's going bad. It's not a fun light. And they'll replace those. But some of the ones that have not been replaced are city-owned lights. So we have a map of those, and those are some of the ones we're talking about replacing.
I'm not understanding, I'm not hearing you. I think.
Oh, so some of
Are they just doing city streets?
they're doing BG&E-owned street lights. So not all of them are owned by BG&E.
Okay, and that's my question. Are they all
I
on
believe they are done
city
with,
streets? Because, we have communities that they're not city streets, but
Right.
they have lights.
right, but I believe the plan with BG&E, we can confirm that, is to replace all of their street lights with LED.
Okay.
Because for them, it makes sense because they don't have to replace them as
Yeah.
often. So once they just go in and they're replacing them because they don't have to do as much maintenance with them.
So we don't know whether they are doing non-city streets.
No, not for sure. We'll confirm that. But with last time I spoke with them, their plan was to replace all of their lights. But we'll confirm if they have actually completed that task.
Okay, you said you had a map to show
We do
where
have-
their lights are.
Versus city lights, yes. We do have that from Public Works.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the city how is the city deciding? Or is the plan just to replace all of our lights also?
I'll turn that over to Mr. Lakonich because he's been working on that project.
Dylan Lakonich, Environmental Programs Coordinator. To your question about BG&E and they're placing their lights on city-owned streets and community-owned streets, my understanding is that BG&E does have lights on both of those different types of streets, but we also have city-owned lights on some city streets. Regarding our plan for converting city-owned lights to LED lights, like Jackie said, we do have a map of that. There are certain lights which are not energy efficient. We're prioritizing the ones that are least efficient, and we're going to leverage certain grants based on whether or not they're awarded to us. We are looking at all of them, including the Cobra headlights. We're looking at the fixtures on Main Street. There's different complications for each type of light, but we are going to build a phasing to convert those lights, if that answers your question.
So is there a budget for this? How are we paying for?
So we currently do not have anything in the CIP as far as I'm aware. As I've said, we'll be applying for some grant opportunities. One in particular would be Maryland Energy Administration's Maryland Smart Energy Communities Grants. This is an opportunity I leveraged at my previous jurisdiction, which I was working with for the same purpose. And then potentially, it's not my decision, well, we could explore that in the upcoming budgets, but as of right now, no, we do not have anything in our current budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then we got it. What he just said. So, we don't have a budget.
Is there anything else you'd like to report on?
Thank you.
All right.
Can't hear it.
So update on Hawkins Cove. The Baylands consultants and designers are now working on the final design and construction documents to 100%. They'll be presenting again to the public, probably late winter, early spring on final design there. The final design now is contemplating, pretty much set on working on the pier design to extend significantly further out into the channel beyond where you see the sedimentation at low tide. What that does is gets you beyond that heavy sedimentation, and they're going to be, as part of the Living Shoreline project, building on some of that, but it significantly decreases on how much dredging will have to be done to reach that pier. And as part of that design, I was talking to the group that's working on it, and where we can, making sure that you can launch your kayak still. So it probably will be a launch somewhere, maybe off of the pier, so you can still get beyond the sediment area, because a kayak paddle launch was something that the community wanted as part of that reconstruction in the cove. So the dredging still would be in the channel. This would be further out, so the dredging costs are now being calculated based on that shorter run from the top of the cove down to the top of the pier. So we should have those numbers fairly soon. We only have $75,000 dedicated from DNR right now for dredging, but we'll have a better fix on the number that we need to seek further funding for as far as dredging to make that happen.
Can I go back a sec to
Sure.
the ferry project, City Electric ferry project? You said 11 proposals were received. This is by the end of January, early February. You hoped a final decision would be made and a contract negotiated.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that. I can't believe I didn't. I just got off a ferry interview, so can't believe I went over that one without talking about it. Just so you know that we had 11 proposals. Initially, they came in on the ferry, electric ferry project. We whittled that down to 6 firms to do round 2 interviews. We've been interviewing for the last 2 weeks. We have 6 interviews we have to complete, where the vendors, the firms get to present to us virtually with additional information. And from that group, we will select a smaller group to do their best and final presentations. And then we'll select a vendor to negotiate a contract with.
Well, how much money do we have available?
So it's $1.95 million, $1,950,000 to build 2 ferries.
So that money is for the
That's for the ferries.
What about the operation?
There's no money for operations in the grant, so that's 1.95 million for the ferries, for the 2 ferries. Don't hold me to a number for the land. There's an additional, so it's about 2.95 million total. Then an additional amount of money for the landing improvements, and then there's an additional sum of money for the infrastructure, for the charging infrastructure, that gets you up to 2.95, close to $3 million total. So there's no money for operating. That would have to be put into the budget That would be, so this would be a great time to put into the operating budget for next year, for '26, because we'll be receiving these ferries in 2025, near the end of 2025.
So the money is for building the ferries.
Landing improvements and
And
charging
landing.
infrastructure,
So the ferries, the landing, and the charging infrastructure.
but not for operating.
So do we have any,
Estimate.
well, yeah, do we have any estimate or plan as far as how to cover the operating costs? Because
We
that's
do-
going to require
Or what it will
at least
be.
two operators, right?
Probably at least two operators. We've talked to the ferry design and builders about whether these could be operated with one or two. The response has been, they definitely, most of the response has been, definitely could be operated with one, ideally with two, but mostly with one. But you would want more than one operator, obviously. Not one person's going to be doing it all the time. So you probably want several people trained in how to operate the ferries. There's also not a
Only 3
budget.
days, though.
Sorry?
It's only proposed to be operated for 3 days.
So
might
but you have
as
to
well get away
determine
with-
how many people that you want, and how many hours we actually going to operate it. And then we also don't have, they don't require a lot of maintenance, but we don't have a maintenance budget in this grant either.
Yeah.
We have pretty good warranties come with these ferries, and they don't, like electric cars, there's not a lot of maintenance to be done, but going forward, there is not a maintenance budget on these. So there's going to have to be an operating budget and a maintenance budget for these ferries. And delivery, we're expecting delivery, once we award a contract, 12 to 14 months. So we would like to get these ferries delivered by the end of 2025. That's what we're pushing for. But definitely within the next fiscal year.
End of 2025 to get the ferries ban.
Yep, end of 2025.
Just in time for the election.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I'm a little concerned about the operating money.
I think that's
Alderman
a
Arnett?
change in concept from what I understood from the mayor in earlier discussions. I thought that we were going to
Third-party operator.
contract out the
Yes,
operation
that is the idea.
rather than hire.
But a sum of money, I have not heard a particular sum of money being set aside yet.
Well, it's a
For
separate
that.
process.
Right.
We'd have to
So-
calculate that.
That would be put out to bid.
Bid,
But the thing with
exactly.
the service is,
So a
potential
separate
operator might make, I don't think they're going to make enough money off of fees. We still have to decide, are we going to charge people to
So
use it? Or just-
initially, this was proposed as a no-charge ferry. We will have to develop an RFP for the operator, to be bid out for an operator for it.
So that, yeah,
We will
separate
develop an
process
RFP.
to put
It's a
out the-
separate RFP.
So operator will be in charge of obviously staffing and everything, but still, I'm curious what I guess we'll know next budget, because next budget's going to have to figure out potential operation. Well, if we're getting the boats end of 2025, when do you think the process will start as far as getting an RFP out there for operation?
We're going to have to do that as slow as things go. I would say midsummer, but we might have to start doing that. We have to start preparing it this spring.
Yeah, I mean,
And if we're going to get it out and get an operator in place, I'd say even earlier, we probably have to start doing it this winter.
25.
spring of what?
2020, well, we don't want to wait till we have the vessels here before we have our operator in hand. We're going to have to start developing our RFP this winter. So we vet it, get it done, get it on the street,
Yeah.
get it, then go through the process and have our operator in hand before we get our vessel.
Yeah.
May I ask,
Alderwoman?
I'm not clear. We're going to put this out to bid. We're going to have a free ferry. What's the benefit to an operator?
The operator would be paid. The operator will be paid
Okay, so they will be paid.
by the city. That was the plan that I heard from the mayor, was that the operator will be paid, but this was to be a free service.
So do we have in the CIP the infrastructure repairs that are needed at both ends of the?
No, this was part of the grant. The infrastructure the landing improvements are part of the grant.
Okay.
There really is nothing to be done on the city dock side. We just need a ramp
Just
really
the
for
east
it.
side.
It's on the Fifth Street side.
Right.
Well, so, but the Alderman's point, we'll need to, when did you say they'll get delivered? End of 25. So we'll need to get the CIP modified for the next budget because it's going to have to include the landing improvements, but also and then also the operation. Because as far as operation, if we get the boats at the end of the year and you're saying we want to roll right into operation by then, we're going to need to fund half a year worth of operating costs, whatever
In the
that.
dead of winter?
Yeah.
And we had intended for this to operate during warmer weather once. And we're
Right.
delivery, most likely, the way things are going right now with the interview process and when this will be awarded, we won't have delivery of these vessels until October at the very earliest. We had hoped to have them in time for the boat show, which is October. They might operate for a month, and then we would be hauling them out for the winter.
Hauling them out for the winter.
The plan was to haul them out of the water for the winter.
Where would we store them?
That is to be determined. We're working that out with the harbor master's office right now.
Because how big are they?
Maybe at
Do we have
Truxton. They're going to be 35, they're going to be 35 foot
35 foot.
by 14.
35-foot boats. Do we have, I guess we have to wait and see what the bids are like for the boats.
Yeah.
Are we specifying in the RFP what the capacity is we're looking for?
So we're looking at a 14 to 15 passenger vessel with about 4 to 5 bicycle capacity, and then at least one ADA seat in the vessel as well. Covered top with capacity for drop-down sides for foul weather.
Okay, all right. And
With isinglass, like isinglass sides you could put up.
And I know the city manager has changed how we handle vehicles, so I think we have incorporated into like, what's it called? Like the maintenance of the vehicle is included in the cost, or replacement cost is included. There's a term I can't think of. What's it called? Do you remember? The replacement cost that's worked into the annual budget.
Yeah, but that's for all of our vehicles.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that's
Right.
going to have to be included into the budget.
Right.
So at this point, our likely storage point would be where we store harbor master boats over at Truxton.
The
I
35
thought they were
foot
going in Gavin's slip
boats.
over Spa Creek.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if that dock has capacity.
Not on the dock, most likely in the parking lot.
Oh, dry storage.
We put a dry storage, yeah, right,
Yeah,
on
I
a
guess-
trailer.
Which I guess would work because it's not really used in the winter, except for snow storage.
Maybe it could become a trigger for the small marinas. Storage of the ferry.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, thank you. That's interesting. I mean, I think it's good, and I think to have a initial service like that, I think it's a good idea to make it free to get ridership and see how it goes, but I'm not quite sure. Presumably, it's going to come out of our transit fund, which is,
Not going to be doing well in fiscal
well, it's
26.
never been doing well.
There are definitely some details to be worked out around
Yeah.
whether or not there will truly be a fee, what fund it will come out of, the maintenance, the et cetera, operation, the RFP has to become developed.
Well, it seems like we would get, do we have any estimate on what the annual operation might be?
And that is going to be, we're asking some of those questions during interviews right now, but until we decide on a final design, the vessel designers are a little bit reluctant to give us firm numbers on that. They've told us there's very little maintenance involved with any of these vessels.
I mean, roughly, I don't know how much pilots will get paid, but they're only going to be working Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that's 3 days a week. If, I don't know, throwing a salary out there, $100,000, but you'd have to divide that at least in half because they're only working 3 days a week. So you might need $60,000, $70,000 per employee if you only have two.
But
So you're talking about maybe $150,000, $200,000 for operation for a year. I don't know. Yeah, okay.
I guess I would rather get an update on leaf blowers and the summary of the petroleum litigation and the sustainability of Shaw Street. Because,
I do have a question before we leave this page, though. I'd like an
Yes, Alderman.
update on Cars Beach.
Yes, okay, I just had an update yesterday from the Director of Recreation and Parks, how we're
Ms.
progressing on Eltonia Cars Beach, and they're still in concept design. They've had some outreach meetings with the neighboring communities of
I'm
Bay
sorry, I can't
Woods.
hear you. Say that again.
They've had some public outreach meetings with the neighboring communities of Bay Woods and Chesapeake Harbor on the concept design and getting some of their input. And now the designer Scapes is the designer on the concept design for the living shoreline part of it. And beach, it's partially living shoreline. And it's parts of it's hardened and natural. And then there's the beach part of it. So hardening that beach, partially making it more resilient, adding to the part that's very eroded. You've been down there, I'm sure, and you see the pipe, the discharge pipe that sticks way out into the water, building that back into the shoreline and hiding it a bit more, and putting some natural grasses there, building some wave attenuation resilience as well. And there are 2 piers at that site that will be reconstructed and fortified so that we can bring one of the electric ferries there as one of the stops for the electric ferries. Now, as part of that, there will have to be some protection for the pier and for where that ferry can drop off, because there's a lot of wave action from the bay there. So there'll probably have to be some breakwaters built out a little bit further. So there's a little bit of engineering that needs to be there to protect the pier and protect the beach a little bit more, because there's quite a bit of wave action from the bay in that area. So that's the shoreline restoration piece of it that's being done by a firm called Scapes. And they're going to move on to the design phase next. And that will be shared with the public once they have a firm design in place. And that'll be happening starting in January. They'll start moving into more of a design there, because right now they have a conceptual design. The second piece of that is the overall comprehensive park design, and that's being done by a firm called McAdams, and Mitchell Silver is the lead there that the Director of Rec and Parks is working with. And that's going on right now, that whole conceptual, taking in all the information and starting to pull all that data together and start that process.
So, and I'm missing some of what you said, but the shoreline project the shoreline piece of it is already underway, is it not?
It's not underway. They're actually not constructing it yet. They had a conceptual design, so then they just finished some of the public outreach piece of it, where they're again with the 2 neighboring communities. Now they're going to move on to the actual final design on it.
No, there was no conceptual design.
There is a design that I've seen. There is a.
Yeah, well, they didn't share it with the community. That was because that wasn't a proper public meeting. Even the designer who won wasn't aware that was going to be a public meeting. Resilience Authority wasn't aware it was going to be a public meeting. They show up and it's a meeting with
the 2 communities.
the 2 communities.
Right.
They didn't even tell me till I found out from the residents. So there's a lot of work still that needs to get done on that, public outreach.
Ms. Johnson said that was the initial public outreach, was to the 2 neighboring communities on that concept design. And then she said there will be further design work based on their input.
They didn't show us the design, I'm just saying, so that was one of my concerns, is I feel like Rec and Parks might need some assistance. I don't know if, traditionally they don't have project managers. I don't know if there's somebody in Public Works project manager who kind of spearhead this outreach effort. My question for staff, do they have somebody dedicated who's focusing on this project, the public outreach component? Because there's a lot that...
I heard Ms. Johnson speak about, not about your meeting, but about initial work that's being done here. Mr. Chair, I would suggest that we invite her to the next meeting and ask her, and suggest that she even bring the plans.
Yeah, good idea.
Because I understand, I think Mr. Adams or Adams Company out of New York is the one who's designing.
That's for the overall park.
Right.
That's McAdams. That's Mitchell Silver and McAdams.
Oh, okay, you're talking,
So you're,
there's the project on the land, and then there's the shoreline project.
right, the shoreline restoration is by Scapes. That's the project where they had some initial sketch done by DNR and shared that with Scapes, and Scapes is talking to the communities with that initial sketch, okay?
They didn't do that, but okay.
So she said, and they got feedback from the communities, the adjoining communities, on what they, what they want to see there and what they're planning to do there at the park. So
Well, they
that's,
got feedback on the park general, like
Yeah.
what are some things that the community wants the designer to look at as far as benches and community assets? But in any case, I think it's a great idea. We can, Ms. Jackson, could you make a note for the next meeting to invite
because
Director Johnson to talk about Cars Beach?
the park design is all very, very initial.
Yeah.
They have not put anything to paper on the park design at all. That's just in the very beginning stages with McAdams. Scapes is starting work on their design now, on the shoreline restoration.
Okay. Can
And
you send
once-
us that design concept?
I'll see if she has something that she can actually release to the public yet.
We
Okay.
actually like being involved at the beginning stages
Yes.
instead of finding
Yeah.
out after it's all decided.
Secondhand, right.
So what Ms. Johnson told me was that once a final design is approved and accepted by Rec and Parks and DPW, that it'll take 4 months to implement it. It's not a really complicated design to do that shoreline restoration.
But where do we fall into this? Because I'd like to, we want to be,
Right, I understand.
hear about it before it becomes final.
Right, and that's why I had not heard anything about it recently, so I sat down with her yesterday, so I made sure I had an update for you.
Okay, thank you.
So for the January meeting, would you like Ms. Johnson to attend and make a presentation?
please.
And maybe Director Vogel.
Okay.
Yeah, whoever's appropriate.
Because Public Works does have a, from what I understand.
They have a role in this as well,
Significant
yes.
role in this.
And possibly, if Rec and Parks thinks it'd be helpful to have the designer here, but it may be too early for that.
Okay.
No.
I will speak to both of them.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
I did have so for conservation easement on page 2, it has been brought to my attention to some of the issues we have with not only conservation easements, but other easements that haven't been properly recorded, I guess.
Right, so this has been a problem for the last several years, and the Conservation Board has
Decades.
been looking, yes, been looking into it. So we have a number of easements that were either the plat and the deed didn't match, or the conservation easement that we have on our website was not mentioned anywhere in the deed. So, and it came to our attention again when Diane Butler was working with this group, this reentry program, and they were doing removal of invasives, and they wanted permission to go on certain properties, and we're wondering if there were conservation easements, but sometimes we said there was, and then it turned out, we couldn't show that there was a conservation easement there. So she had a Chesapeake Conservation Corps intern working with Mr. Lakonich on trying to rectify some of these issues. And the Conservation Corps intern did a really remarkable job on fixing some of the problems on our website and rectifying some of them. And then Mr. Lakonich took over and did a lot of work on it as well. And he has prepared a draft memo that we're going to give to the Office of Law to look at. They may be having to ask for some supplemental funds in the next budget for a contract attorney to do some surveys. There's some problems with some of the deeds, some of the maps. They might have to do some surveys to rectify some of the issues. And we want to share them with some of the other departments as well, because we don't want to run into another issue like Wells Cove, where we don't have something recorded, where we don't have a proper survey that matches our deeds. We want to get everything exactly right.
Yeah.
And have all of our easements on our website and everything matching up. Did you want to add anything to that?
Pretty accurate.
Okay. Pretty accurate.
I'd like to add something,
Oh,
though,
go ahead, Alderman.
and it's too bad the Office,
I know, I was hoping she was here.
the Office of Law leaves.
And that's our land attorney as well.
Because I'm trying to figure out what's happening
Didn't notice.
with a conservation easement for Jeremy's
both
Way, so we can get down to fixing the bulkhead.
Right.
And I really do, I'm wondering why, we already have a right-of-way for the stormwater, and I'm wondering why that isn't enough. And it almost feels like we're just at a loggerhead, we're not going anywhere. Some of the residents that are joined want to get money for their alleged ownership there. In the meantime, the bulkhead continues to deteriorate.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like anything is going on in law, and I sent them a proposal to make that a conservation easement. Nothing. So I'd like to add to your list, we can get a reporting on the conservation easement or whatever the progress is for Jeremy's Way bulkhead,
That one in there?
because that just continues to deteriorate.
Okay. And Mr. Laconis just said that Jeremy's Way is not even listed on our website.
It's not even listed on our website?
There are various easements which are not listed on the website, including Wells Cove. So this might be part of our upcoming investigations to ensure that every single easement that's ever been created is on that website and that people are aware of it. To be completely frank with you, this is the first time I'm
I
hearing
really
it.
can't.
This is the first time I've become aware that Jeremy's Way is considered an easement.
Yeah, well,
Definitely not
so
saying it's
that's
not.
part of the siloing of the city, so one staff doesn't talk to another staff, but I'm really getting a lot of grief from various parties, people who live on Jeremy's Way, people who live at Chesapeake Landing. And the Gavin was going to just quickly bring a contractor over that was doing some other work, give them $20,000, have them fix the bulkhead. And the Office of Law said, no, you can't do that, which is probably true. And it's one of the times when I'd really like Kevin to just go ahead and be a gunslinger. But meantime, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And you're right, there's a lot of information that didn't get handed over when Eastport was annexed in 51. That's the same problem we're having with Grissom Square, where Public Works didn't even know what was under the ground. But, you know, we're not getting any action on these things. That means that I continue to get grief from legitimately from constituents saying, where are you on all of this stuff?
Yeah. We are going to leverage as much institutional knowledge that we have and potentially contract with firms who we know that are able to recover some of this information. There was one easement which we couldn't find the information about, but because of their previous work, we had actually reached out to them and said, did you find any sort of information regarding this? And they were actually able to get us back some deeds and plats that we had never seen before. So we know there's expertise out there that we can leverage. I'm going to make sure that this is perfectly rectified and so that this problem doesn't come up in the future.
Okay, so Ms. Jackson, could you add this to the next month's agenda, particular on the easement issue, and invite, I want to put the Office of Law on the agenda, and in particular, because we need to figure, I want to dig into exactly where the holdup is, if the law office can handle these requests, or if we need to find money or additional staff. But as I think you do well know, we've had these issues for decades.
Yeah.
We've found easements dating back 20, 30 years that weren't properly recorded, which I guess is also connected to planning and zoning, because I think it seems like either they or the Office of Law need to incorporate some kind of procedure or practice to get these things recorded once the development's completed.
Yeah. I think once we get these, there's three standouts and then some other minor things. Once we get these rectified, and then there needs to be, like you said, a system for making sure we get them recorded consistently as we obtain them. I think once we do that and we follow that system, we'll be in good shape. And a lot of credit goes to Mr. Lakonich and to the Conservation Corps intern and the Conservation Board for finally addressing this issue. It has been a huge problem, and as we know, it can cause a lot of problems and some major litigation. But we'll get this memo done and over to the Office of Law, and so they'll have it prior to the meeting.
Okay.
We're almost done with it. We just need to tweak it a little bit. We'll get it done probably next week.
And thank you for not leaving the room right at 4:30.
Yeah.
So I wish we could do that.
While we're sort of on this sidetrack, can I ask that we add
Go ahead, Valerie. Go ahead.
add to your list resiliency for Ward 8 and other low-lying wards? I have no idea where we are. I know we had the Army Corps of Engineers do a study of where the jeopardy points are, and I don't really know what other wards besides Ward 8 have low-lying areas, but that's another question that I get frequently, when we get done with City Dock, are we next, and what does next mean?
Are you aware of the project the Resilience Authority and Public Works are working on, the Maritime Resilience Study?
No?
Okay, so it's mostly Ward 8.
Okay.
And they mostly were focusing on Ward 8 and Back Creek. It's a study, they have a grant. Jasmine, our engineer in Public Works, is the project lead on it. Jasmine Wilding is. And they're looking, the first step is to evaluate the Back Creek watershed and look for the most vulnerable areas and the opportunities for projects and identify what kind of projects they would use to address those areas.
So I guess two questions. One,
So maybe,
who's doing it? And two, does that mean it goes on somebody else's list, or is that something where you can also?
I can put it on this list of projects.
Yeah.
And that's something we could have Ms. Wilding speak to.
Okay, yeah, I do get questions, and, who knows when we'll get
Yeah, and
That?
she can update us on
where
where we are with it.
it.
Well, I
Yep.
think you missed,
Might be in
you
Ward
missed,
4 by then.
you missed the memo. We're gonna let Eastport flood, turn it into wetland area,
Well,
and call
the
it,
ma-
we're gonna call it the Marine Republic of,
Actually, this is relevant to the electric ferry because we're going to have an e-ferry running from 5th Street to 2nd Street because there's
no,
a
my
waterway going through.
plan is to have it come to my house. We'll just go right over top of Eastport. All right.
May I ask my
Yes,
question about
sorry.
easement?
Yeah, Alderman
So I'm
Woods.
going to test you now. What area has the largest conservation easement in it?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I believe it's the Kingsport easement.
Where?
Kingsport easement.
Good job. You're absolutely right.
I've learned a couple things.
I just wrote a letter of support for Phase 2 of the stormwater project that they are working on. And so the community should be commended. First of all, I didn't know that the largest conservation easement was in my ward.
Quite a large one.
Had no idea how far back that property actually went. I mean, I knew where the pier was and all of that stuff, but didn't have any idea how extensive the easement was. It's like 44% or something of the city's total easement.
Wow.
But anyway, they are to be commended because they have been on it, and now they're writing this grant request to DNR to get funding for the next phase. They already had funding for the first phase, and that's been completed. So at least Kingsport is working with us, and they gave big kudos to, who was it, our stormwater management guy, what's his name?
Mike Rosberg.
Matt,
Michael Rosberg.
yeah, Michael Rosberg, who's been working closely with them. So I just wanted to give them a kudos and and to test your knowledge about that.
I'm glad I passed. But thank you for writing that letter. We like clean water.
So, my second question doesn't have anything to do with any of these items, but there was just an announcement, I think it was today, the governor is the principal of the Chesapeake Bay Principals Group now. I serve on LGAG, which is the local government, and then there's the community piece stack. But I just wondered whether because he made an announcement about what he was going to do as far as Maryland is concerned. And I missed it. I heard just the beginning or the end of it, and then the news clip was off. But I just wondered whether you had heard any of that, but
I haven't. Have you? I did not.
Okay.
No, we have no knowledge.
something to look forward to.
So we've a little less than 10 minutes. I would like to try to end around 5 so we can get to Midnight Madness. Are there any other urgent? Do you really
Nothing
want?
urgent, but we have a couple of new things. Shaw Street, we met today with Donovan Harold, who's the lead engineer on the build-out on Shaw, and added Dylan to the team with the architect for the build-out. We talked about energy efficiency and environmental elements to add both to the building and to the site for stormwater control and other environmental controls, but all energy efficiency and recycled materials, energy efficient materials within and without on that building. There's no budget set for that yet. But the project is just starting and kicking off. We are going to, as part of the RFP that's just being developed, there's going to be a solar roof on Department of Transportation's building because they're getting a new roof, and we're going to tag on to that RFP for solar on Shaw's roof as well.
Great.
So, good
So
news
wait,
there.
What's the one you're tagging onto?
Department of Transportation's solar roof. So we're going to put
Oh, okay.
solar, as part of that RFP, we're going to add solar for Shaw's roof.
I don't remember seeing that in the CIP either. Solar panels?
I think it is in there. Yep. Yeah, I believe the roof I know is in the re-roofing of the Department of Transportation is definitely in there. I believe solar on the roof is also in the CIP for the Department of Transportation.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Should we adjourn real quick? Ross is not here.
And the other good news is that the fire chief is now open to electric fire trucks, and their vendor of most of their trucks, Pierce, brought an electric fire truck Monday or Tuesday over to the Eastport Fire Department, invited us to come over and see it. And afterwards, he said he's interested in electric fire trucks. The Maryland Energy Administration just opened up a grant for heavy-duty trucks, including electric fire trucks, and they will provide 75% grant funding towards heavy-duty trucks. So he is enthusiastic about applying for grant funding for an electric fire truck.
That's great. Yeah, I think we should try to secure as much grant funding as we can before the end of the year, because I don't know what's going to happen to the state
Yeah.
or federal budgets.
That grant closes January 31st of 2025. So we will work with the fire department and the fleet manager on applying for a grant for an electric fire truck. A regular diesel fire truck is about $980,000. These trucks are going for about a little over $2 million right now. So it's almost
Regular one is how much?
about $980,000 for
about $1 million?
a regular fire truck. An electric fire truck is about $2 million.
It's about double the cost.
Yeah.
Although
And they
it should
charge off.
technically last longer than.
Oh, they do. And Frederick has one, DC is getting one, I forgot the other local ones, but the fire department has seen them in action. They trust Pierce. Pierce is their regular vendor for their regular trucks. LA's getting one, San Diego's getting one, a bunch of other jurisdictions are getting these same trucks. And they convert over to diesel if the power wears out, but our range is so small here, and larger jurisdictions are using them without running out of power, even on site, getting there, getting back, standing on site and running for an hour. They don't run out of juice. They do recommend that you have a fast charger on site for a fire truck, but we already have grant funding for putting chargers in at our facilities, so we could use our grant funding we already have for electric vehicle infrastructure to put a fast charger at the fire station.
Good. Too late, Ross, we already adjourned.
Good. Why is the door to our offices and the restroom locked?
Oh, we're now on our pass system for security. They just did it.
What?
Yep, they just put that in the last week.
Look, this is bullshit. Why are we not consulted? I mean, geez, I have a
Okay, we
5
are on
o'clock.
Where our
record.
office is located.
I have a 5 o'clock meeting in my cubicle.
Oh,
can't
yeah,
get
to
in
get
there.
back there,
To
to get back to your cubicle, it's
even
locked
get
too.
Yeah, we can't get to our office.
Nor to the
whatever you
bathroom.
call it, but.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
not thinking it through, yeah.
All right, is there anything else?
No, nothing else pressing, I don't think.
5 minutes left, anything else?
Yeah, it's okay.
I did want to know where we are on the leaf blowers now that we changed the timeline, but
So if we're changing the timeline to 3 months
say
after
that?
the effective date, which is January 22nd, so that would put us February, March, April 22nd for issuing citations.
right.
Sorry, say that again.
So if we're not issuing citations for 3 months past the effective date, that would put us to April 22nd.
Right. I think that's what the newspaper said, right?
I didn't read the article. I've been jamming all day, so I haven't had a chance to read the newspaper yet.
I would love, well, before we have a motion to adjourn, is there anything for the good of the order? I'm sorry, is there anything else for Ms. Gall?
Huh?
Okay.
Thank you for staying, though.
Yeah, we
course,
had a lot of
as long
questions
as you
for
need us.
this time. So anything else for the good of the order?
Happy holidays.
I would like to get on the record that we, with all due respect, expect staff to stay for the duration of our meetings, because everybody else, your staff, including us, have to stay here the whole time. And we can't always pick exactly what time we can meet because we have various scheduling conflicts. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if somebody needs to come in late to stay late, that's fine, as long as they get 8 hours or 7.5, whatever it is. But I do hope we can figure out something where staff stays for the duration, because we could have used
Yes, especially for the
advice
conservation
today.
easement, yep.
from the Office of Law. So I'll make a note to reach out to the city attorney about this. But in any case, anything else? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I'm seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, meeting is adjourned. Reverse.